The dodge. It will be controversial. I'm prepared to duck the 2x4 so lay on if you feel the need. First, let me say that, had I the knowledge earlier, I would have taken a different path. Now to my story. My wife and I celebrated our 25th anniversary in 2013. We went on our dream trip. People thought that we were newlyweds by our behavior. That year, she also went back to college to pursue her second degree. In 2014, things became a little strained. I was under a lot of stress at work, and having to work extra hours, as we had lost a partner. She was spending a lot of time at school and staying late to study. I chalked it up to the circumstances and believed we'd get it back to normal soon. You know the rest of the story. We were both changing clothes in our walk-in closet when I saw the passion mark on her neck. I questioned her about it. She didn't miss a beat, and simply said that I had done it. Not true. We hadn't been intimate in over a week. We had family visiting downstairs, and I chose not to create a confrontation at that time. My personality is that of a high achiever. The buck stops here. Failure is not an option. The captain of the ship is ultimately responsible. That sort of thinking. So, I let the weekend pass until the relatives left. During that time, I mulled over the situation, and concluded that this must have been all my fault. I became depressed. I considered suicide. I decided that I could not live with my failure and came up with a plan. It was to look like an accident, which is really fairly easy, since as an outdoors man, I have often seen accidents narrowly averted. On 2 occasions I almost went through with it. I was found out, and my plan was prevented. I hooked up with a very good therapist, who encouraged me to start meditation. And I read a lot of books on infidelity and how to recover one's self-esteem. During this time, I actually confronted my wife, and was met with denial and gaslighting. By then the signs of the affair were long over, and I had no way to confirm with evidence. During the years that followed I continued to get my act together. Wish I'd done that 30 years earlier. We actually had discussions of infidelity in the abstract, regarding the hows, whys, and collateral damage of such a destructive decision, but she never actually admitted it. I stayed with her because I loved her, and because I did not want to inflict my pain on my children. I arrived at a peaceful state of mind, which brings me to today, the topic. A week ago, we were having a conversation, and she remarked, "I want to thank you for not leaving me." I knew at that point, that if I wanted to get the full truth, that was the moment. But I made a decision. I am happy with my life. I have moved past all the pain and confusion of those years. The only thing to be gained would be to allow her to assuage her guilt. I chose to let that moment pass. Let me share what I've learned. My therapist was a former evangelical preacher turned Buddhist. Now that's an interesting combination. We spent many sessions and a lot of hours discussing Ecclesiastes. One day he said, "The point of all this is, can you live with uncertainty?" The answer was yes, in all aspects of my life. Interestingly, after the initial confrontation, which occurred 2 years after the affair, my wife, without any urging from me, became completely transparent. It was as if she'd found this forum and was doing all the things a WW must do to reconcile. I have verified from time to time by snooping, using the techniques that I found here. Now knowing what to look for, I think that if something were still going on, I'd see some sign of it. But of course, one is never certain of anything. But I can live with that. I will admit that there may be a little vindictiveness in deflecting what may have been, on her part, an effort to bring it out into the open. I read that as perhaps ongoing guilt and pain on her part. I was just not willing to open an old wound. I've made my peace with it alone. She will have found her own way alone. The memory still lingers, like an unpleasant odor. I still can recall all the sorrow, fear, and rage. I choose not to keep them in the front of my vision. I choose not to let the past plot my path into the future. Oh, and I'm pretty certain that I know who he is. I almost lost it and decked him at a public function. Glad I didn't. It wouldn't have fixed what's wrong with him, and it wouldn't have fixed me. Comments. Was your wife who found out your plans? Didn't she ask why? Didn't you have a serious talk about the reason of your depression? Did you put it on different issues aside your suspicions? I find hard to believe she didn't blame herself and break down back then and even gaslighted you 2 years later. Maybe she thought confession would out you back right close the cliff. OP responds. She found a journal that I was using to keep myself focused on the objective. Her reaction was one of denial and panic. We never talked much about that, even years later. When I sought out a therapist, I offered many times to take her along to one of my sessions, but she always declined. I would never have chosen this path. It kept me on the edge of total despair for years. When it started, I had no experience to guide me. I was unaware of sites like this one. I just blundered on for years. Finally, when I stopped leaning on my own ego and sought help, things started to come together for me. Basically, what I did was what so many of you have offered as the first step: take care of yourself. I wish to thank all of you for your insights. Someone asked why I ended the title of my thread W, a question mark. It is because I know that all of life is full of uncertainty. As my therapist asked, Can you live with uncertainty? The answer for me is yes. I felt that I was responsible for the outcome of all relationships in my life, personal and professional. I approached these things as if my entire self-worth relied on success in these relationships. It created an intensity that allowed me to succeed, at least on the surface, so much so that I was willing to kill myself if I felt that I had failed. That's my point. My path, while excruciating, has allowed me to move past all that. I am not responsible for the happiness of others, only for my own. Whatever someone else has done in the past is not my problem. Only the way forward matters now. My WW's behavior over the subsequent years indicates that she has atoned for what she did. I can assure you that if I found myself in the predicament I was in so many years ago, I would do exactly as some of you have done. I'd walk away from it. 2 years later, my FWW and I are still together. There has been no suspicion of inappropriate behavior. We are still intimate. Overall, I am content with life. However, my ability to trust has never returned. I think that if we had addressed the issue when it occurred, I might have been able to heal, or I might be gone completely from this relationship. Now, as we enter retirement, we are good companions with benefits. But for me at least, there is no emotional intimacy. If she walked out tomorrow, I'd be okay. As a cautionary tale, this is the cost of infidelity. I don't want to leave you with the impression that I'm a miserable person. I'm not. In many ways my life is enviable. It's just that sometimes I trigger, and then I mourn what was lost. This time it was a nightmare totally unrelated to my W's affair. I'd like to share a bit more detail, which may answer some of your questions. My wife was raised by a very cruel mother who believed in toxic shame as the best way to control her children. They all have some pretty serious issues. For my W, it was a low self-esteem, which drove her to try to succeed at everything she did. Consequently, she was a great mom, good at her job, and active in the church and community. It also caused her to have a great need for external validation, which made her vulnerable to an affair. Subsequently, her deep shame has not allowed her to confront the affair. She could not even admit it when caught red-handed. I have tried a number of times to get her to go to MC with me, thinking that we could broach this topic in a safe, neutral environment. She has consistently refused. Thus, she has had to bear the burden of her guilt alone. Subsequently, we have discussed the issue of infidelity on many occasions, and she knows exactly how I feel about this. She is also aware that upon discovering the affair, I came very close to suicide. It took me a good therapist and several years to get a handle on my own issues. Faced with what I considered an impossible situation, I found that the best solution for me was to attain some emotional distance, which is what I have done. I have tried many times over the years to offer her the opportunity to discuss with her, always met with denial and gaslighting. How could you believe I'd ever do that? Only the one time that she seemed vulnerable, and I was already at a place in my head that I didn't choose to take her up on it. The wound analogy is valid, but the wound bleeds only occasionally. I have led a very active life. I have other old injuries that limit what I can do. I'll never again run a 10K, I'll never again bench press 225, but I still ride my bike, and I still lift weights 3 times weekly. My point is that life is not perfect and accommodations must be made. The choice to be happy with those accommodations is up to the individual, and I am happy most of the time. To get her to address this issue would require my serving divorce papers. And even then, there is the chance that it would be turned around on me and my children would hate me. They would never believe that their mother would do such a thing. I have a daughter with mental health problems. Her parents divorcing would destroy her. So, I have made my accommodations. I understand that many of you cannot comprehend this, but you have my gratitude for listening. That's what I really needed. Comments: are you certain beyond a reasonable doubt she cheated on you? I understand the mysterious passion mark, but do you have anything else? You said you hadn't fooled around in a week. Bear in mind hickeys can last 2 weeks on longer depending on a person's health, stress level, and other factors. Was there other unexplained behavior during this time? Her later saying she glad you didn't leave her is not conclusive and may be grossly inconclusive. Without other supporting evidence, her denying is not necessarily gaslighting and lying. OP responds: I've been away for a bit. In answer to your question, yes, there was a lot of evidence. Leading up to the discovery of the passion mark, there was a growing distance between us, which was rather sudden, considering that we'd just celebrated our 25th anniversary and seemed to be more in love than ever. Then there was a shift in attitude of total disrespect, even contempt, for me. I couldn't do anything right. Our bonding life went from 2 to 3 times a week to once or twice a month. She'd gone back to college for another degree in career change. She began to talk about a friend she'd met in some of her classes, about our age, who'd also gone back to pursue a second career. She went on about what a cool guy he was. Then the late-night study groups, from which she would come home and immediately shower. Then the obsession with a movie where a bored housewife asserts her independence by having an affair. All of this made me uneasy, but I trusted her. Then the encounter with the passion mark on her neck. We hadn't been intimate in several weeks. Suddenly the previous 6 months made a lot of sense. Later I discovered a FB message from her to him that conveyed a lot of emotion. No smoking gun, but that's when I strongly suspected that he was the AP. Lastly, her thanking me for not leaving her. I could probably have gotten the details at that time, but by then, I detached to the degree that I no longer wanted to deal with it. I decided to let her live with the guilt of her own decision. Probably not the healthiest choice, but it's what I needed at the time. I felt somewhat justified and got a degree of satisfaction knowing that she'd suffered for what she put me through. Do I wish that I had a more open and honest relationship with her? Sure, I do, but I'd also like Warren Buffett's money, and I'm not going to get either of those. Following the discussions on this thread, I actually gave some thought to bringing all of it out into the open. But another matter with one of our kids arose, and I saw how much guilt and anger she carries in her core, and how much she has to use denial in order to function. I think that if I could get her to see a good therapist, she might be able to deal with a lot of these issues. She has repeatedly refused. I'm not the one qualified to do this for her. It's been an eventful few weeks. I decided that you guys were right. Long past time to deal with the elephant in the living room. So, I sat her down one evening, held her hand and told her that we had to deal with the issue that was creating a wall between us. She played dumb and had no idea what I was talking about. I went on to say that truth between us would allow us to overcome our problem and allow us to grow closer. Still no reaction. Then I said, I need you to tell me about the affair. Well, the response was nothing that I had envisioned. She jerked her hand from mine, stood up, started swearing at me, called me every vile name she could think of, called me psychotic and delusional. I sat breathing deeply, remaining relatively calm, and said, we still need to have this conversation. She stormed from the room. I spent the next 3 nights in the guest room. I tried to maintain the 180, being respectful and cheerful. She did not speak one word to me during this time. The vehemence of her attack left me shaken, and at first, I began to doubt myself. But I pulled it together and reminded myself that I knew what I saw. On the 4th day I had to have some space, so I told her I was spending a few days at our river cabin. The response was, fine. This is a bit long, so I'm going to break it up here. The few nights turned into 2 weeks. No communication at all. I held out hope that she would consider what was at stake and call me to have the conversation. Didn't happen. After 2 weeks of silence, I consulted an attorney. I waited another week and had her served. The call came then. There was a lot of nothing really happened. He was just a friend. Things just got out of hand. It didn't mean anything. The usual cheater's script. Then she changed tactics and enumerated all of my failings that led her to do this thing. I just let her run. When she was done, there were several seconds of silence. Then I said, thank you for telling me the truth. But it's too late. I hung up and blocked her number. I spoke with my kids and told them that their mother and I had grown apart and that we were separating. I gave no explanation beyond that. My daughter asked if I had an affair. I told her that I would never do that to my family. It's been hard for me emotionally. I really miss the woman that I married, but I don't miss the one that I had that last conversation with. I have realized that I actually checked out of the marriage years ago. So now it's time to get on with the rest of my life. I don't plan to tell my kids the details unless I find out that she has told falsehoods about me. My daughter, whom I was most concerned about, took the news well. She seemed to know that something was up. Maybe we've not been as discreet as we thought we were. I don't think that my WW will trash me because of the fear that I will tell the truth. Unfortunately for her, she was raised by a narcissist who used toxic shame as her preferred child-rearing technique. I believe that is the reason that she could never admit to me that she had done, even when confronted and offered amnesty. I believe that she will take that secret to her grave. At this point, I still love the woman that she was, and I have compassion for the person she has become. As for me, I'm doing well.
After all, I've had years to prepare myself emotionally for this event.
The reason for my post today is that it was the last thing on my to-do list before my dog and I take off on a cross-country road trip. Kayak and bike are on the car, camping and fishing gear in the trunk. My guitar will be the last thing that I load. If you attend open mic night in some bar in Arizona, I might be the old guy on the stage. Just a quick follow-up. Dog and I are still on the road, having a blast. My attorney and accountant are working out the financial settlement. I haven't spoken to WW since our last conversation. I keep in touch with my kids. I have made the condition that we don't talk about her. They seem to have arrived at the correct conclusion as to the cause of my leaving. They realize that her infidelity would be the only thing that would cause me to do this. I haven't confirmed or denied to them. I think it's her responsibility to own this eventually. I'm not planning to return to my home state until after the divorce is final at the end of Feb, looking toward the Gulf Coast to spend the winter. Once the dust has settled, who knows, I may never go back. I'm just glad that I finally made the decision, and I intend to enjoy the rest of my life. I'm grateful to all of you who have made this journey with me. Just checking in. It's nice to have somebody to talk to. I left all my friends in VA, and I really wouldn't want to talk to them about this stuff. Anyway, I've had a good time traveling. Mostly camping and fishing, but I've found that sleeping on the ground is not as much fun as it used to be. But I've seen some beautiful places. I've settled in for a bit in Idaho, where I found a cabin on a month-to-month basis. It's pretty basic and has no heat other than a wood stove, so I'll be getting out of here by Thanksgiving. I've already found a place with a short-term lease in Louisiana, on the water, and reasonably affordable. For the winter, the internet is a wonderful thing. I've stayed in touch with my kids. One of my sons mentioned that his mom had confessed that she really messed up things. Maybe she's starting to develop some self-awareness as to how all of this happened. Anyway, not my problem anymore. My divorce becomes final in mid-February. I'm not planning on going back to VA until after that, if I go back at all. Do I wish that I had confronted this long ago? Yes. Would the outcome have been different? Probably not. At the time of VA, my pride would not have allowed me to accept that it happened. And she confessed, I probably would have walked away. I believe she knew that. Not making excuses for either of us, just making an observation. Our relationship became a lot like the frog placed in a pot on the stove with the water temperature gradually increasing to boiling. The frog will stay in the pot because he does not perceive the situation for what it is. In our case, I finally realized that, hey, we're in boiling water here. I got out of the pot. She declined to do so. Am I living out an adolescent fantasy? Sure, and I am aware of that. It's just that it feels so good to be out of that damn boiling water. There are family and financial issues that remain to be sorted out. I will eventually have to deal with them. But for now, I think all parties need some time to process what has happened. In the meantime, I'm going to enjoy my life. I'm not looking at this as punishment for her. I really don't wish more suffering on her than we've both already endured. But at this point, I can't help her. You're right, this is a time for healing for me and for growth as well. I hope she uses the time as well. Got an interesting call over the weekend from a dear friend, who is also a partner in my former practice. She wanted to know what the hell was going on with me. Apparently, stories are starting to trickle out. So, I gave her the overview of the affair. My depression afterward, our failure to deal with the issues, and the inexorable erosion of the marriage until there was nothing left. She said, "You know I'm on your side." I told her there was no battle and no need to take a side. She said she'd take charge of my social life when I came home and make me a hot commodity on the over 40 dating circuit. I laughed and told her that it might be a while before I was ready for anything like that. She said she still had a lot of questions. So, after swearing her to confidentiality, I gave her the name of this website and my username. She asked why I didn't come to her before with this. She's been like a younger sister to me. I told her that I was ashamed. She closed the call with, "I'll always have your back." I disconnected the call, and for the first time since I left home, I broke down. Sorry, got to take a break. My middle son called me today, very upset with his mom, me, and the whole situation. My STBXW had admitted to him that she had an affair, but basically blamed it on me. She told him that I was working so many hours and gone so much that she felt abandoned. There is a grain of truth in that part. One of our doctors retired and another was out on extended maternity leave, with just two of us left to carry the burden. It was a lot like my internship, working 12-hour days and on call every other night. It went on for about 6 months. She told him that the affair was something that she needed to do for herself. I called total BS on that. I explained to him that this little thing that she did for herself damn near killed me and totally destroyed our family. He had questions, and I answered whatever he asked. He closed with, "Thanks for talking to me, Dad. I love you." So, I guess she can tell herself, and anybody who will listen, whatever it takes for her to get through the day. But that just confirms for me that I've made the right decision. I have to go back to VA to clean up some loose financial ends. It will be a good opportunity to see my kids. I may be gone for a while. I'm certain that my failure to confront her about her affair contributed to this. But she also knew how badly I was hurt, and she had to see how our relationship had deteriorated over the years. She chose to ignore these things, or perhaps she just didn't know how to deal with them. I asked her to go with me to counseling on multiple occasions, but she always refused. When I brought the issue into the open, I think that she was overwhelmed, and that's why she verbally attacked rather than engaging constructively. In any case, I have seen that she has become someone that I do not want in my life. I wish her well, but not with me. I hope they will learn from our mistakes. My attorney did say that she had asked him if there was any chance that we could talk about this. I just said no. I really don't mind her taking half. We had a long life together. Besides, she spends a lot more than I do, and she'll feel the loss of income. I really won't. Well, got to get ready for the next move west. I really appreciate the compassion and friendship you all have provided. I'll update at some point, probably after the divorce is final. Update: I've settled into my new digs, enjoying my new community. I've met a group of folks here who get together on weekends to play music, and I think this is where I'll find my friends. My STBXW has recently started to lean on my middle son as her confidante. I suspect that this is meant to open an avenue of communication with me. Or maybe it has nothing at all to do with me. who knows? Anyway, she has revealed to him that the year of her affair was also the year that her mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Her explanation was that she felt her life slipping away, and she panicked. She reached out for something to make her feel alive. Helps to understand her frame of mind, I guess, but doesn't change the facts. Anyway, I'm counting down until Feb when the divorce becomes final. For those who are concerned about my son, be reassured that he is over 30 and very mature. He played in a rock band for a few years. He's seen it all and knows bull when he sees it. He's also a very good listener, which is why my STBXW has confided in him. I think he'll see it for what it is, but he accepts her account as her version of her actions and motivations. She's his mother, and he will always love her. That's unconditional, as it should be. I love him the same way. New Year. I spent some time over the holidays with my oldest son. He revealed that he was actually aware of the affair while it was going on. He had just graduated from college and drove over to Richmond to visit some friends. He was out at a bar and saw his mom and her friend. She was supposed to have been at an educational meeting that weekend. He started to go over to greet her but realized that the body language indicated that they were not just friends. He wanted to tell me but could not face being the one to blow up our family. We had a frank discussion of what really happened, all of it. We cried together over our mutual loss. He has a long way to go to heal. To address some of the questions, I have no idea how my STBXW is doing. The Buddha taught that suffering is caused by the things to which we attach ourselves. That's one attachment that I have let go. To my knowledge, my ex does not know that he saw her. That may be part of the healing yet to come. My son saw a counselor a few years ago to deal with anger issues. He quit after a couple of sessions, said it didn't do any good. I'm not sure that he was ready to confront the causes of his anger. At this point I am doing well with reconstructing my life. The distance helps, since I don't really have to deal with prying questions from former friends and acquaintances. I can avoid their sympathy, pity, or judgment, none of which will benefit me. My other 3 kids seem to be getting along pretty well. Life is definitely a process. There's an old Jimmy Buffett song with the last line, some of it's magic. Some of it's tragic, but I've had a good life all the way. I'm slowly getting there. I never learned the OM's identity for certain. At this point it really doesn't matter as to why it took so long for me to confront the issue. That's complex. I guess you could attribute it to a conflict-avoid personality. The affair was something that was painful to me. I tried to find peace within myself, but I was unable to do so. The pain and the anger persisted. I finally couldn't take it anymore. I've gone back over my thread which started years ago. Other posters predicted the outcome. Interestingly, I don't view her as an evil person. She's someone who did something selfish and stupid. I allowed her to think that she got away with it. A lot like a driver who hits a pedestrian and panics. They drive away and hope that they will never be found out. Then one day the police show up at their door. I think of such people as weak, but not evil. Last update. My eternal gratitude is for those who have shared your experience and have given me support and advice on my journey. My divorce becomes final next week. I am in the process of constructing my new life, and things are going well. My kids are handling all of this pretty well. My STBXW persuaded one of my sons to arrange a call between us last week. I had blocked her number, so she couldn't call. She said that she was sorry that she had hurt me. I thanked her for saying that. I suspect that this was something that her therapist had advised. There wasn't anything else to say, so the conversation ended. I spend my days playing music, hanging with new friends, bicycling and paddling. I've been out on a couple of coffee dates. My gut feeling is that women in my age range are looking for long-term companionship. I think that I'm just not in a position emotionally to offer that to anyone. But I enjoyed the company. We'll have to see how that all shakes out. I'm looking forward to a very good year. I wish the best for you, also. Half year. Life after divorce can be really good, even at my age, mid-60s. I've had a lot of time to contemplate how I got here, and how my own actions contributed. I won't go into all that, but I can now look at my marriage and acknowledge my 50% that caused the relationship to fail. My ex and I never really communicated on an intimate level. This was due to flaws in both of us. When it came time for me to leave, instead of being honest and telling her that I no longer loved her, I set her up with a confrontation about her affair. On some level I knew that she would never be able to come clean. I knew that she would balk and that she would try to blame me. So, I used that knowledge to try to give myself the high ground. As I look at it now, that ground wasn't very high. But I had to move on, and that's what I've done. Life is good. I met a lady at a music festival, and we've begun a FWB relationship. She is an instructor at a nearby college. We share the same tastes in music, books, and outdoor activities. She got burned in a bad divorce 10 years ago and has no interest in a long-term commitment. We live about 2 hours apart, so our time together is somewhat limited. Most importantly, my dog approves of her. So, thanks again to all of you who helped me to get through this. Peace. Had she come clean, we would have had something to work with. I should have forced the issue long ago, whatever the outcome. But I had to deal with my own feelings of failure as husband, which allowed all this crap to happen. maybe a little codependent. So, I left myself with the option of dealing with my feelings alone. That required emotional detachment. By the end, I was just done, and she throws herself on my mercy with true remorse. I would have acted compassionately at the time. I may have tried to rebuild our marriage, or I may have found eventually that it really wasn't what I wanted and moved on. Her reaction was what could have been predicted of someone who is extremely proud and cannot admit mistakes. She was like a desperate cornered animal and lashed out at me. She was just showing me who she really was, and that was a person to whom I no longer wished to be married. Knowing her as well as I do, I think that I could have predicted this. It would have been better to simply have told her that I no longer loved her and that it was time to separate. I've had to question my motives on the approach that I took. When my son saw them together, he did not recognize the man. My ex-W had gone back to college for another degree. I assumed that it was someone that she met in that setting. Thankfully, that's just one of many things that I no longer obsess about. When I took off cross-country, I felt that I was running for my life to escape a toxic and painful relationship. I holed up in a cabin in Idaho for several weeks while I considered the question of whether my life was worth living. And how I'd go about that. No girls, no party, no fun, no sun. Although I did get puking drunk once. There ended the similarity to spring break. Playboy, I drive a 10-year-old sedan. All of my possessions fit into it. I live in a 3-room house which was originally built as a fishing camp. I spend my days in meditation, reading, exercise, walking my dog, and playing my guitar. My best friend is my dog. My social contacts are the regulars at the local diner and the folks that I get together with on Friday evenings to jam. My wife got the big house. We split the retirement funds down the middle. I have enough to last me until I'm 80 if I'm careful, at which time my financial advisor has joked that it will be time for me to move on. I have one lady friend whose company I value. We see each other infrequently due to the distance between us. I don't qualify for the jet set even by local standards. But understand this, my current lifestyle has given me greater peace than anything that I experienced during my marriage. I live as I do because I choose to do so. I've been trying to avoid ripping this scar open, but maybe my doing so will help some of you to understand why I waited so long to leave, which seems to be your major sticking point. I've always been a hyper-responsible person. I was the one who took the responsibility when anything went wrong on my watch. That can be pathological if taken to the extreme. I wasn't young when this crap went down. We had been married 25 years. I was in my mid-50s. Being who I was, I blamed myself for her affair. I became depressed, decided that the only way to atone for my failure was suicide. I didn't want my kids to know, so I did some research and designed my own accidental death. I was keeping a journal at this time. I had the method and the time planned out. I must have behaved strangely during this time. My ex-W picked up on this and thought that I was having an affair. She searched and found my journal. This was the crossroads. She could have admitted what she had done and tried to help me heal and to repair our relationship. Not. She gaslighted me, and very thoroughly. She had me believing that I was delusional. So, I just shut up and tried to go on with life believing that I had had some sort of psychotic episode. That kind of self-doubt ripped me up emotionally. This went on for a few years. Somewhere around year 6, I decided to seek help. Took a while for me to get around to telling my therapist why I was actually there. I asked him if it was possible that I hallucinated the episode in the closet. He looked at me and asked, "Have you ever hallucinated before? Have you hallucinated since? Are you hallucinating now?" No, and no. Then you weren't hallucinating then. The light bulb exploded in my head. I continued to see the therapist. During that time, I asked my ex-W to go with me. I thought that it would give her a safe environment to deal with our problem. She always refused. I believe that she was terrified of admitting what she had done. And so, I set about saving myself by emotionally detaching from her. We became more like business partners whose relationship existed only to maintain our lifestyle. During this time her dad passed and her mother developed dementia. She became angry, and a lot of that anger was directed at me. I tried to get her to see a family therapist. She always refused, and I continued drifting away. If you peruse my thread, you'll see the decay of my marriage. Finally, I decided that I couldn't do it anymore. Things had to change. So, I tried to gently but insistently get her to address the affair. Her response was to attack me and then withdraw. She admitted what she had done only after being served with divorce papers. By then I had made my decision. Just an update. I've moved back to my home state to be nearer my kids. The weather got kind of hairy in Louisiana over the summer, so I figured it was time to make a move. Anyway, I met for coffee with the ex, at her suggestion. She's been doing some serious work with her therapist. The meeting was at the therapist's recommendation. She really seemed remorseful for all the crap she put me through. She seemed to have acquired a lot of insight as to what she did and why she did it. There were a lot of foo issues, including bad things as a preteen. She didn't offer any of this as an excuse, but as an explanation and an apology. There was no attempt to rekindle our relationship, for which I was relieved. Just makes it a lot easier for us to coexist in the same community. I'm glad that she's made this progress. Even though my kids are grown, They still need their mother. And they need her to be healthy. Don't really think that her apology was meant to assuage her guilt. Since it was on advice from her therapist, is feel that it was kind of like one of the steps in a 12-step plan, where you apologize and make peace with those you've harmed. I didn't even ask the name of the OM after all. She was the one who betrayed me. He was just the instrument of that injury. Before I decided to leave her, his name was important to me. But no more. I've moved past caring about that. What I wish is that I had been in a place emotionally that would have allowed me to confront the issues in our marriage. That would have given us resolution, one way or the other. The ending, was it something you expected? Do you think it is a happy ending, or a sad ending? Subscribe down below.